Konnichiwa, minasan. O genki desu ka? Welcome to the intermediate course of my channel. Let's learn Japanese with Eric. In this lesson, we learn how to make the conjugation the more the nantoka nantoka using the ba hodo conjugation. Yoroshii desu ka? Hajimemashou. In this lesson, we learn how to make sentences such as the more you practice, the better you become, or the more you study, the higher your grade, or as for cars, the faster the better. To express these sentences, we need to use the ba hodo conjugation, which can be used for verbs and adjectives. For verbs and i-adjectives, the conjugation derives from the ba conditional conjugation that we learned recently in lesson 62D. However, for na-adjectives, the conjugation derives from the Nara conditional conjugation that we learned in lesson 62E. As we mentioned earlier, for verbs and i-adjectives, the conjugation derives from the ba conditional. At this point, I assume you know how to make the ba conjugation. Otherwise, you can review this lesson in 62D. But I'll briefly explain how to make it as we go along. For verbs, the general formula is to say the ba form of the verb, then the dictionary form of the verb, and then add hodo. For i-adjectives, form the ba form of the i-adjective, which ends in kereba, then repeat the i-adjective, and then add hodo. Let's look at examples. For example, the verb taberu, to eat. It is a ru-dropping verb, so we drop the ru ending and add reba to form tabereba. Then we repeat the dictionary form of the verb, taberu, and then add hodo to form tabereba, taberu hodo, tabereba, taberu hodo, which means the more I eat, the nantoka nantoka. For an i-adjective example, let's use oki, which means big. We drop the i ending of the adjective and then add kereba to form oki kereba. Then we repeat the adjective oki and then add hodo to form oki kereba oki hodo, oki kereba oki hodo, which means the bigger the nantoka nantoka. For na-adjectives, we use the Nara conditional, which we learned in lesson 62E. It is very simple to use. The general formula is to say the na-adjective first, followed by Nara, then repeat the na-adjective with the na, and then add hodo. For example, the na-adjective shizukana, which means quiet. We drop the na, and then add Nara to form shizuka nara. Then repeat the na-adjective with na, shizukana, and then add hodo. Shizuka nara, shizukana hodo. Shizuka nara, shizukana hodo, which means the quieter the nantoka nantoka. So, did you get all the three patterns? Let's practice making the conjugations first. Then we'll look at sample sentences. For example, the verb to see, or miru. It is a ru-dropping verb. So we drop the ru and add reba to form mireba. Then we repeat the verb miru and then add hodo. Mireba, miru, hodo. Mireba, miru, hodo. The more I see, the nantoka nantoka. I put the I in brackets because it can also be you, he, she, we, they, depending on the sentence. But for all our examples, let's use I. Next verb is to write, or kaku, which is a category 2 verb, or last hiragana changing verb. For category 2 verbs, the last hiragana of the dictionary form changes to the I series, and then we add ba, so that the ku changes to ke, and we add ba to form kakeba, kakeba. Then we repeat the verb kaku and then add hodo. Kakeba kaku hodo. Kakeba kaku hodo, which means the more I write, the nantoka nantoka. The next verb is to speak, or hanasu, another category 2 verb. So the su ending changes to the e series, or se. Then we add ba to form hanaseba. Then we repeat the verb hanasu, then add hodo. Hanaseba hanasu hodo. Hanaseba hanasu hodo. The more I speak, the nantoka nantoka. Another category 2 verb, to read, or yomu. The mu ending changes to me, and we add ba to form yomeba. Then we repeat yomu, and then add hodo. Yomeba yomu hodo. Yomeba yomu hodo. The more I read, the nantoka nantoka. Another category 2 verb, to use, or tsukao. The u ending changes to e, and we add ba to form tsukaeba. Tsukaeba. Then we repeat the verb tsukao and add hodo. Tsukaeba, tsukao hodo. Tsukaeba, tsukao hodo. The more I use, the nantoka nantoka. Our last verb example is benkyou suru, to study. Suru is an irregular verb. Its ba form is sureba. So we form benkyou sureba. Then we repeat the verb. You can repeat benkyou suru or just suru alone. For convenience of space, I'll just repeat suru. And then add hodo to form benkyou sureba suru hodo. Benkyou sureba suru hodo. However, I can also say benkyou sureba benkyou suru hodo. And the meaning is, the more I study, the nantoka nantoka. Now let's practice making the conjugation with i-adjectives. Our adjective is takai, or expensive. We drop the i and replace with kereba to form taka kereba. Then we repeat the adjective takai and add hodo. Taka kereba takai hodo. Taka kereba takai hodo. The more expensive, the nantoka nantoka. Next i-adjective is muzukashi, or difficult. We drop the i and replace with kereba to form muzukashi kereba. Then repeat the adjective muzukashi and add hodo to form muzukashi kereba muzukashi hodo. Muzukashi kereba muzukashi hodo, which means the more difficult, the nantoka nantoka. Our last i-adjective example is a special case, the adjective good in Japanese, which is i or yoi. For conjugating, we always use yoi and never i. I is only for the non-past affirmative, and all the other conjugations, negative, past tense, and so on, come from yoi. As usual, we drop the i and replace with kereba to form yokereba. Then we repeat the adjective yoi and add hodo to form yokereba yoi hodo. Yokereba yoi hodo, which means the better it is, the nantoka nantoka. Next, let's practice making the conjugation with na-adjectives. Our example is benrina, which means convenient. We drop the na and replace with nara to form benri nara. Then repeat the adjective with the na ending, benrina. Then add hodo to form benri nara benrina hodo. Benri nara benrina hodo, which means the more convenient, the nantoka nantoka. Next example is shinsetsuna, which means kind. Same thing, drop the na and replace with nara to form shinsetsu nara. Then repeat the adjective with the na ending, shinsetsuna. Then add hodo to form shinsetsu nara shinsetsuna hodo. Shinsetsu nara shinsetsuna hodo, which means the kinder, the nantoka nantoka. Last example is genkina, which means healthy or active. Same thing, drop the na, and the whole thing becomes genki nara, genkina hodo. Genki nara, genkina hodo, which means the healthier or the more active, the nantoka nantoka. Now let's look at example sentences. Okay, I'll say some sentences in Japanese and see if you can figure out the meaning in English. The English translation of the words are under each Japanese word. Now see if you can put them together. I assume at this point that you know all about Japanese particles. Otherwise, you can review them in lessons 22 to 24. Now here's our sentence. Boku wa tabereba taberu hodo ookiku natte shimau. Boku wa tabereba taberu hodo ookiku natte shimau. In English, the more I eat, the bigger I unfortunately become. Now, the te shimau conjugation expresses regret, and we learned this in lesson 42. Next sentence, Yomeba yomu hodo wakaranaku narimasu. Yomeba yomu hodo wakaranaku narimasu. Translation, the more I read, the more I don't understand. The naku narimasu conjugation is very useful. The naku part comes from wakaranai, meaning don't understand. Now changing the nai form of any verb to naku and adding narimasu means no longer do or no longer does. Next sentence, benkyou sureba suru hodo seiseki ga takaku narimasu. Benkyou sureba suru hodo seiseki ga takaku narimasu. Translation, the more you study, the higher your grades become. Takaku is an adverb formed from the adjective takai, which means high. Forming adverbs from i-adjectives can be reviewed in lesson 18. Next sentence, Renshū sureba suru hodo jouzu ni narimasu. Renshū sureba suru hodo jouzu ni narimasu. In English, the more you practice, the more skillful you get, or the more you practice, the better you become. Jouzu ni is an adverb meaning skillfully, and it comes from the na-adjective jouzuna, which means skillful. You can review making adverbs from na-adjectives in lesson 18. Next sentence, kuruma wa hayakereba hayai hodo ii desu. Kuruma wa hayakereba hayai hodo ii desu. In English, as for cars, the faster, the better. Next one, wain wa furukereba furui hodo oishii desu. Wain wa furukereba furui hodo oishii desu. In English, the older the wine, the more delicious it is. Next one, pasokon wa atarashikereba atarashii hodo takai desu. Pasokon wa atarashikereba atarashii hodo takai desu. Translation, the newer the laptop, the more expensive it is. Next sentence, video game wa muzukashikereba muzukashii hodo omoshiroi desu. Video game wa muzukashikereba muzukashii hodo omoshiroi desu. In English, the more difficult the video game, the more interesting it is. Next one, machi wa nigiyaka nara nigiyaka na hodo tanoshii desu. Machi wa nigiyaka nara nigiyaka na hodo tanoshii desu. Translation, the livelier the city is, the more fun it is. Next one, sumu basho wa shizuka nara shizuka na hodo suki desu. Sumu basho wa shizuka nara shizuka na hodo suki desu. Translation, as for places to live in, the quieter it is, the more I like it. Now, sumu is a verb which means to live in a place, and it modifies the noun basho, meaning place. You can review making noun clauses out of verbs in Lesson 43 on nominalization using nouns. Next example, sushi wa魚が新鮮なら新鮮なほどおいしいです。Sushi wa魚が新鮮なら新鮮なほどおいしいです。Translation: As for sushi, the fresher the fish, the more delicious it is. Last sentence, ピカソの絵は変なら変なほど有名です。ピカソの絵は変なら変なほど有名です。In English, as for Picasso paintings, the stranger it is, the more famous. So to summarize, in this lesson we learned how to form the ba hodo conjugation, which means the more the nantoka nantoka. The general pattern for verbs and i-adjectives is to form the ba conditional conjugation, then say the dictionary form of the verb again, and add hodo. For example, the verb to ask, kiku. Following the pattern, that becomes kikeba kiku hodo, kikeba kiku hodo. And forming a sentence, say, 質問を聞けば聞くほどいいです。質問を聞けば聞くほどいいです。And in English, that translates to, the more you ask questions, the better. For i-adjectives, the pattern is the ba form of the i-adjective, which ends with kereba. Then repeat the i-adjective and add hodo. For example, the adjective red or akai. Following the pattern, that becomes akakereba akai hodo, akakereba akai hodo. And forming a sentence with it, say, Ringo wa akakereba akai hodo ii desu. Ringo wa akakereba akai hodo ii desu. And in English, that translates to, as for apples, the redder the better. For na-adjectives, we use the Nara conjugation and not the ba conjugation. The pattern is the na-adjective plus Nara, then repeat the na-adjective with its na form and add hodo. For example, the adjective simple or kantan na. Using the pattern, that becomes kantan nara kantan na hodo, kantan nara kantan na hodo. And using it in a sentence, say for example this one, kantan nara kantan na hodo ii desu. Kantan nara kantan na hodo ii desu. And in English, that translates to, the simpler, the better. So this ends our lesson on ba hodo, or the more the nantoka nantoka. 次のレッスンにまた会いましょう。頑張ってください。If you're serious about becoming fluent in Japanese, it's important to practice daily, learn grammar, and build up vocabulary. My whole course is designed to give you a strong basic foundation in the Japanese language that you can build solidly upon. So please click like, share, or subscribe, and watch the next video in the series. Nihongo no benkyou ni ganbatte kudasai. じゃあ、またね。